Hello and welcome to QuickTip32, and this follows the same subject area as QuickTip31. In other words, trying to manage the drawing objects drawn on a chart. So what I've done in this case is created an indicator that draws a whole bunch of drawing objects on the chart. In fact, each bar it will draw an ellipse, a rectangle, a vertical line, a horizontal line, trend line, and some text. And what it also does is calls a function, and what that function does is it makes sure that there are no more drawing objects of a certain type than the number that's fed into it. So hopefully that makes sense, or will make sense. So let's have a look at the indicator to start with. And it's a very simple indicator. We're using the new TradeStation drawing objects, so we've included the namespaces for drawing and drawing objects. We have an input for a color, although you could have done that without that. We're calculating the tick value, so we're going to use that in the positioning. And then we're setting up several drawing object types here: text label, trend line, horizontal line, vertical line, rectangle, and ellipse. And then we clear the print log at the beginning. And then at the end of each bar, in other words, when bar status 1 is equal to 2, then we create each of those drawing objects in turn and add them to the chart. So we create the bar text, add it to the chart, we create the trend line. In fact, let me just show you the full syntax for that bar text. The trend line and a horizontal line and a vertical line, and these are sort of decided. I've just done these somewhat randomly, I don't really care where they are. The rectangle and the ellipse. Now, one thing you do need to bear in mind if you try this is you'll see that as far as the BN point for the ellipse and the rectangle, I've used a current bar -1, and that will, if you don't do something otherwise, work out that you're trying to call or go to a negative bar. That's not possible, so what you need to do is set the max bars back. I've just set it to 10 just to make sure you don't get an error. So having done all those things, and each time we add them, we then call this this function, which I've called QuickTip32, and that has an input, which in this case we've set to 499. So let's look at the function. And the function goes through every sort of drawing object, in at least the ones that are created by analysis techniques. And if you're not familiar with those, if you just go to the documentation above, you'll see that you've got the trend line created by an analysis technique number 1, text created by analysis technique type 4, rectangle 7, horizontal line 10, etc., etc. So what we do is we just loop through all those types. So we start with a counter of 1, and then we just use a while loop, and we increment by 3 each time, so we go through each one. And what it does, it says if the drawing object items of the particular type, for example, 1 would be a trend line, I believe, let's just double check that. Trend line, if the count is greater than num is the number that we're feeding into the function, in this case 499. If it's greater, then what we do is we delete the trend line of the type counter, in this case trend line as type vector, because we want to delete the oldest. We're deleting as type, so it looks a little, the syntax there a little complicated, but what we're doing is we're looking at the drawing object type when the type set by the counter, in this case, the first case it's a trend line, and that's going to create a vector of all those trend lines. We want the oldest one, which is conveniently put in the 0 position, and we want it as a drawing object because we're deleting that drawing objects. And what that will do is when the number gets above 4999, in other words, when it gets to 5000, then it will delete the oldest. Then we're incrementing the counter by 3, which means that the next time, instead of looking at the trend line, we will look at text and etc. Let's just have a look back at the chart, and you can see that if we go back, there is a big gap at the beginning of the chart where all the drawing objects originally drawn. Of course, you can still see the horizontal lines have been deleted. And then what I've also done is included at the bottom here something that's just listing the counting the number of drawing objects. So if we were to go back to, let me show you the syntax for that as well. But if we were to go back to the indicator, and I'll show you the print statement, simply very similar to the one, or rather using the drawing object.items.count. If we were to change this to, for example, 5,000, and verify this, and then we go to the chart, you'll see it running now. This is a little slow, and I think it's been a useful exercise in doing this, but I think probably the approaches in QuickTip31 are better, particularly perhaps the reusing the drawing objects and changing its parameters, which I think was my example 3. I think I would tend to think that was more efficient and better programming practice, but let's just watch this as it develops on the chart. Okay, and you'll see now that we're getting this annoying warning message, because in fact the program is still calling the function, but what we've done now is set the number to 5,000. So in fact it's exceeding the number, because it adds the drawing object before it goes through the function and deletes it. So if we just go back to make that 4999, then everything should be fine. And incidentally, there is, as I mentioned in QuickTip31, a bug with the earlier version of TradeStation. So I've done this using my version of, or rather TradeStation version 10. So you can see that that's worked fine without errors. So what I'm going to do is just show you that function again, and I'm going to make these programs available for Gold Plus members in case it's of use to you. But thank you very much.